King Taejo stood at the window of his royal chamber, gazing at the stars. His empire stretched across 3 galaxies, with thousands of planets under his control. Yet he wanted more. Always more. "Your Majesty," a voice called from behind. Taejo turned to see Admiral Hwan entering with a small device in his hand. The admiral bowed deeply, his silver uniform gleaming in the dim light. "What news do you bring?" Taejo asked. "Our deep space probes have discovered a new world, Your Majesty. The locals call it Earth." Admiral Hwan placed the device on the table and activated it. A holographic image of a blue planet appeared, slowly rotating. Taejo moved closer, studying the projection with interest. "Tell me about this Earth." "It is located in a small solar system at the edge of the Milky Way. The planet has vast oceans, diverse ecosystems, and plentiful resources. Most importantly, it has large reserves of fresh water and rare minerals our empire needs." "And its inhabitants?" Taejo asked, circling the hologram. "They call themselves humans. They are bipedal creatures, somewhat similar to us in appearance but much weaker. They have achieved some technological development. They have basic space travel within their solar system, global communication networks, and primitive energy weapons." Taejo snorted. "They haven't even mastered interstellar travel." "How primitive." "Indeed, Your Majesty. They would be no match for our forces." The king reached out, his fingers passing through the hologram of Earth. "What strategic value does this planet offer?" "Its position would give us a foothold in a new sector of the galaxy. From there, we could launch further conquests. Additionally, Earth sits at a crossroads of several potential trade routes." Taejo nodded slowly. "I want it." Admiral Hwan bowed again. "I will begin preparations immediately, Your Majesty." "No," Taejo said. "This will not be a standard conquest. I want the royal fleet for this mission." The admiral's eyes widened. "The royal fleet, Your Majesty, for such a primitive world." "You question my decision, Admiral." Hwan quickly lowered his gaze. "No, Your Majesty. I merely thought a single battle group would be sufficient." "This is not merely about conquest," Taejo explained, returning to the window. "This is about making a statement. I want this to be swift and overwhelming. I want stories of our power to spread across that entire region of space. The royal fleet will ensure that happens." "As you command, Your Majesty." Taejo smiled. "How long until the fleet can reach this Earth?" "At maximum speed, approximately 40 days, Your Majesty." "Make it 30, Taejo ordered. "I grow impatient." "Yes, Your Majesty." After the admiral left, Taejo called for his royal advisor, Jinki. The old man entered quietly, his robes dragging on the floor. "You summoned me, Your Majesty." "I am sending the royal fleet to conquer a planet called Earth," Taejo informed him. "I want you to research everything about this world and its inhabitants. I need to know their weaknesses, their strengths, their leaders, their military capabilities." Jinki nodded, but his expression revealed concern. "The royal fleet, Your Majesty, for an unknown world." Taejo frowned. "You too question my decision." "I merely suggest caution, Your Majesty. We know very little about this planet." "That is why I'm asking you to learn more," Taejo said sharply. "Or have you grown too old to serve your king?" Jinki bowed deeply. "I live to serve, Your Majesty. I will have a full report for you by tomorrow." After his advisor left, Taejo returned to the hologram. He studied the blue planet with hungry eyes. Soon, it would be his. 3 days later, Taejo called his war council. 6 admirals, including Hwan, gathered around the large table in the war room. Advisor Jinki stood to the side with his notes. "The royal fleet is ready, Your Majesty," Admiral Hwan reported. 500 warships, including the flagship Death's Shadow. 200,000 troops prepared for ground invasion if needed. "Excellent," Taejo nodded. "Advisor Jinki, Share your findings about Earth. The old advisor stepped forward. Earth is home to approximately 8 billion humans divided into nearly 200 political territories they call countries. They have no unified global government, though they do have a weak assembly called the United Nations. Such division will make them easy to conquer, Admiral Minho commented. Perhaps, Jinky continued. However, they have shown the ability to unite against common threats in the past. Their global military forces, while primitive compared to ours, are substantial. They possess nuclear weapons, which could cause significant damage. Nothing our shields cannot handle, Admiral Vaughn dismissed. Their technology level suggests they have no defense against our weapons, another admiral added. Taijo raised his hand for silence. Is there anything else we should know, advisor? Jinky hesitated. There is one thing, Your Majesty. These humans have an unusual trait. Throughout their history, they have shown remarkable adaptability when faced with overwhelming odds. They innovate quickly under pressure. Admiral Vaughn laughed. What can they possibly innovate in the few hours they'll have before we destroy their defenses? I merely suggest we should not underestimate them, Jinky said quietly. Your concern is noted, Taijo said dismissively. But I agree with Admiral Vaughn. No primitive species can stand against the royal fleet. He turned to the admiral. You will command this mission personally. It is my honor, Your Majesty. Taijo stood, and everyone bowed. You depart tomorrow. I expect regular updates. When you arrive at Earth, give them one chance to surrender. If they refuse, show no mercy. I want that planet intact, but I care nothing for its inhabitants. As you command, Your Majesty. The next day, Taijo stood on the observation deck watching as the royal fleet prepared for departure. The massive ships gleamed in the light of the twin suns, weapon systems visible on their hulls. Advisor Jinky joined him, standing quietly at his side. You still have concerns, Taijo said, not looking at him. I serve at your pleasure, Your Majesty. I have said what needed to be said. Taijo smiled. Soon, Earth will be another jewel in my crown. Perhaps I will visit this planet myself after it is conquered. As you wish, Your Majesty. As the royal fleet moved into position for the jump to hyperspace, Taijo felt a surge of pride. Soon, his empire would grow even larger. Soon, Earth would know the name of King Taijo, ruler of the Celerian Empire. Little did he know that his decision would lead to one of the greatest disasters in the history of his reign. Dr. Ju Park rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of cold coffee. It was past midnight, but she couldn't tear herself away from the observatory's main computer. The strange readings had first appeared 3 days ago, faint signals from beyond Neptune's orbit that didn't match any known celestial body. You're still here. Dr. Sunho entered the room, his own eyes red from lack of sleep. Look at this, Ju pointed to her screen. The objects have changed course again. They're definitely not natural. Sunho leaned closer. How many are there now? I've counted at least 400 distinct objects moving in formation. The largest is, she paused, double-checking her calculations, approximately 3 kilometers in length. Sunho's face paled. That's impossible. The data doesn't lie, Ju said quietly. Whatever these things are, they're heading directly toward Earth. Sunho reached for the phone. I'm calling Director Kang. This can't wait until morning. Within hours, observatories across the globe confirmed Ju's findings. Emergency meetings were called at the highest levels of government. The objects were moving faster than anything humans had ever built, and they were definitely artificial. 5 days later, the first clear images arrived from the Hubble Space Telescope. The objects were ships, massive vessels with sleek designs unlike anything from Earth's science fiction. President Lee looked at the photographs spread across the table in the underground situation room. How long until they reach Earth? She asked. General Mincio checked his notes. At their current speed, approximately 2 weeks, Madam President. Have they responded to our transmissions? No, Madam President. We've been broadcasting welcome messages on all frequencies since confirmation. Nothing but silence. Defense Minister Chunho leaned forward. We should assume hostile intent. These ships are clearly designed for war. We can't be certain of that, argued Foreign Minister Yunji. We shouldn't provoke a potentially peaceful contact. As they debated, a young communications officer burst into the room. Madam President, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the alien fleet. The room fell silent. President Lee nodded. Put it through. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The being that appeared looked surprisingly human-like, with pale blue skin and silver eyes. He wore what appeared to be a military uniform. People of Earth, the alien spoke in perfect English. I am Admiral Juan of the Royal Xilarian Fleet. Your world has been claimed by His Majesty King Tejo, ruler of the Xilarian Empire. You have 72 hours to surrender your planet and all its resources. Resistance is futile and will result in your extinction. We await your response. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. Well, President Lee said after a moment, I think that answers the question about their intentions. Within hours, the message had been broadcast to every nation. Panic spread across the globe. Some religious groups declared it the end times. Others celebrated the arrival of advanced beings. Many fled to rural areas, fearing attacks on major cities. In an unprecedented move, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session with representatives from all nations present. The meeting was broadcast live worldwide. We must stand united. President Lee addressed the assembly. This threat concerns all humanity, not individual nations. The Russian president nodded. For the first time in history, we face an enemy that sees no difference between our countries. We must respond as one planet. Chinese, European, African, and other world leaders quickly agreed. Old rivalries were set aside as a global defense strategy was developed. Military forces worldwide were placed on highest alert, and scientists worked around the clock to analyze the alien transmission for any useful information. Dr. Joo Park led one such team at South Korea's Advanced Research Institute. She and 50 other scientists from around the world studied every frame of the brief alien message. Look at this, she told her colleague Dr. Kida from Japan, pointing at a section of the alien admiral's uniform. These markings could indicate rank or possibly battle achievements. And the ship interior, Dr. Kida added. The metal looks similar to our titanium alloys, but with an unusual blue tint. If their technology is based on similar principles to ours, maybe their weapons and defenses are too. Ju mused. As scientists worked frantically, military leaders developed response plans. Nuclear weapons were prepared, though many questioned their effectiveness against a civilization capable of interstellar travel. 48 hours after the ultimatum, President Lee addressed the United Nations again. We cannot and will not surrender our planet, she declared. We propose sending a delegation to meet with Admiral Juan to discuss peaceful alternatives. The proposal was approved unanimously. 5 representatives were chosen: a diplomat, a scientist, a military officer, a medical doctor, and a linguistics expert. Dr. Joo Park was selected as the scientific representative, much to her surprise. Why me? She asked Director Kang. Because you noticed them first, he replied simply, and because you understand their technology better than anyone else now. The delegation prepared to depart in Earth's most advanced spacecraft. Their mission was officially diplomatic, but everyone understood the real purpose: to gather intelligence and buy time. As they boarded the ship, General Minseo pulled Ju aside. Your primary mission is to learn anything you can about their weapons and defenses, he whispered. We need weaknesses we can exploit. Ju nodded grimly. I understand. The small Earth vessel launched toward the waiting alien fleet. Billions watched the live broadcast, holding their breath. As they approached the massive alien flagship, Ju studied everything she could through the viewports. The alien ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, sleek, powerful, and clearly built for war. They're hailing us, the pilot announced. The communication screen activated, showing Admiral Vaughn again. You have chosen to ignore our generous offer of surrender, he said coldly. Yet you come in a single unarmed vessel. Explain. The lead diplomat stepped forward. Admiral Vaughn, we come seeking peaceful dialogue. Surely our worlds can find a way to coexist without conflict. The Admiral laughed. You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. It is conquest. Jiwoo studied the background of the transmission, noting details about the ship's interior. Every piece of information could be vital for Earth's defense. Nevertheless, the diplomat continued, we request a face-to-face meeting to better understand your needs and intentions. After a long pause, Admiral Vaughn nodded. Very well. You may dock with our vessel. But understand this, your delay tactics change nothing. When our deadline expires, we will take your world by force. As their ship moved toward the docking bay, Jiwoo looked back at the distant blue Earth. She wondered if she would ever see home again. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Sunwoo paced the length of the command center. Massive screens covered the walls, showing military deployments across the globe, and the position of the alien fleet now holding position just beyond the moon. Any word from our delegation? He asked, checking his watch for the 5th time in an hour. Colonel Daehyun shook his head. Not since they docked with the alien flagship 12 hours ago. The door slid open, and President Lee entered with her security detail. Everyone in the room stood at attention. At ease, she said. Tell me we have a plan. General Sunwoo gestured to the central table where a holographic display showed Earth and the alien fleet. We've positioned our nuclear arsenal for maximum coverage. Every submarine, silo, and bomber is ready. But frankly, Madam President, if their technology is as advanced as it appears, our weapons may be useless. We need an edge, President Lee said, her face grim. Something they won't expect. As if on cue, a communications officer called out, incoming transmission from our delegation. The main screen flickered to life, showing Dr. Jiwoo Park's face. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were alert and focused. Dr. Park, report, President Lee commanded. Madam President, we're being monitored, so I can't speak freely, Jiwoo said carefully. The diplomatic discussions are ongoing. Admiral Hwan has extended our deadline by 24 hours as a gesture of goodwill while we continue talks. General Sunwoo frowned. They're just playing with us. Perhaps, Jiwoo continued, but I've gathered significant data on their technology. I'm transmitting it now on the secure channel. Pay special attention to file X-37. It's illuminating. President Lee nodded, understanding the hidden message. Good work, Doctor. Stay safe. After the transmission ended, the technical team quickly accessed the data package. File X-37 contained sensor readings Jiwoo had secretly taken of the alien ship's defensive systems. This is interesting, said Engineer Do-Hyun, who had been called in to analyze the data. Their shield technology operates on a modulating frequency pattern, cycling through a sequence of energy states. What does that mean in plain language? General Sunwoo asked. Do-Hyun looked up, his eyes wide with excitement. It means there's a fraction of a second between each cycle when the shields are vulnerable, a tiny window of weakness. If we can hit them precisely at that moment with the right frequency, we could penetrate their defenses, President Lee finished. Exactly, Do-Hyun nodded. But we'd need perfect timing and a way to generate an electromagnetic pulse at the exact counter frequency. General Sunwoo leaned over the engineer's shoulder. Can you build something like that? Not alone, and not quickly, Do-Hyun admitted. We'd need the world's best minds working together. President Lee didn't hesitate. Make it happen. Call in everyone. DARPA, MIT, Beijing Tech, Oxford, Tokyo University. I don't care about national rivalries or security clearances. We need a solution in 24 hours. Within 3 hours, a virtual conference connected 200 of Earth's top scientists and engineers. Engineer Doyun and his team shared Juwoo's data, and the group quickly split into specialized task forces. Meanwhile, on the alien flagship, Juwoo and the diplomatic team continued their charade of negotiations. Admiral Huan seemed to enjoy toying with them. "Your efforts are futile," he said during one meeting, "but I admire your persistence. It's almost entertaining." Ambassador Kim maintained a poker face. "We believe peaceful coexistence is possible, Admiral. Peace is achieved through strength," Huan replied. "Your world lacks it." Juwoo noticed something during these meetings. When communications came in from other ships, a slight flicker occurred in the lighting, suggesting power was being diverted to communication systems. She filed this information away, looking for any pattern or weakness. Back on Earth, progress was being made. The science team discovered that a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse, delivered at exactly the right moment in the shield cycle, could create a cascading failure in the alien defensive systems. "The problem is delivery," Engineer Do-Yun explained to the military command. "We need to hit multiple ships simultaneously, and the timing must be perfect to within microseconds." General Sunwoo studied the proposed weapon designs. "What if we modified our existing missile systems? We could launch a coordinated strike from multiple positions." "It could work," Do-Yun agreed, "but we'd need a way to synchronize the attack perfectly." A young lieutenant spoke up. "Sir, what about the global positioning satellite network? We could use it to coordinate precise timing across all launch platforms." The room fell silent as everyone considered this idea. "It's brilliant," Do-Hyun finally said. "Simple but effective." As scientists and engineers worked to modify Earth's weapons, military forces moved into position around the globe. Submarine commanders received new targeting data. Air Force pilots were briefed on suicide missions if necessary. It was humanity's last stand. With just 4 hours remaining on the extended deadline, Juwoo and the delegation were returned to their ship. "Your time is nearly up," Admiral Huan told them. "Return to your leaders and prepare for surrender." Once safely aboard their ship and away from alien monitoring, Juwoo contacted Earth. "The aliens are overconfident," she reported. "They've shown us much of their technology, believing we can't possibly understand it. But I've gathered more data on their shield cycles and power systems." She transmitted the new information, which allowed the Earth scientists to fine-tune their attack plan. "There's one more thing," Juwoo added. "Their fleet operates on a centralized command system. All tactical decisions flow from the flagship. If we can disable it first, the other ships will be momentarily vulnerable while command transfers to secondary vessels." General Sunwoo nodded. "That gives us our primary target." As the Earth ship approached home, Juwoo watched the alien fleet through the viewport. They were magnificent vessels, sleek, powerful, and deadly. But they had a weakness. Every system did. With just 1 hour remaining, President Lee addressed the world. People gathered around televisions, radios, and phones to hear her words. "Citizens of Earth, today we face the greatest threat in human history. An alien force has come to conquer our world, believing us weak and divided. They are about to discover their mistake." She paused, her expression resolute. "Throughout our history, humanity has overcome seemingly impossible challenges through courage, innovation, and unity. Today, we stand together as one people of Earth, ready to defend our home." As she spoke, the modified weapons were armed. Military personnel worldwide prepared for the coordinated attack. Engineer Do-Yun and his team made final adjustments to the timing systems. "The aliens gave us a deadline," President Lee continued. "They expected surrender. Instead, we will give them a response they never anticipated." She looked directly into the camera, her eyes fierce with determination. "We will not go quietly. We will not surrender our world. Today, we fight for Earth." As the deadline expired, Admiral Huan prepared to order his fleet to attack. He never imagined that Earth would strike first. Admiral Huan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Death's Shadow, watching Earth grow larger on the main view screen. The blue planet looked peaceful, almost vulnerable. His lips curled into a slight smile. "Status report," he commanded. Captain Minje stepped forward with a datapad. "All ships in position, Admiral. The humans have not responded to our final warning." "As expected," Juan said. "Their delegation was merely a delay tactic. Primitive beings always cling to hope until the end. Shall I order the first wave to begin the attack sequence?" Admiral Juan raised his hand. "Not yet. Let them see our full might first. Position the entire fleet in visual range of their major cities. I want them to witness their doom approaching." The massive alien vessels moved closer to Earth, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. From the ground, they appeared as new stars moving across the daytime sky, beautiful yet terrifying. In the underground command center, General Sunwoo watched the alien fleet's movements on the tactical display. Beside him, President Lee and the Joint Chiefs of Staff waited in tense silence. "They're positioning for maximum psychological impact," General Sunwoo observed, "showing themselves to frighten our people. Their arrogance will be their downfall," President Lee said. "Are we ready?" Engineer Do-Yun nodded from his station. "All modified weapons are in place. The targeting systems are synchronized through the satellite network. We can hit them precisely at the vulnerable point in their shield cycles." "And our people?" "Emergency broadcasts have been running continuously. Civilians have taken shelter where possible." President Lee took a deep breath. "Very well. Initiate Operation Thunderstrike." General Sunwoo picked up the secure phone. "All commands, this is Fortress Actual. You are authorized to execute Thunderstrike. I repeat, execute Thunderstrike." Across the globe, military personnel received the command. Submarine captains ordered missile launches from beneath the ocean. Air Force bases scrambled fighter jets armed with the modified weapons. Ground-based missile batteries emerged from hidden bunkers. In orbit, Admiral Juan was about to give the order to begin the attack when Lieutenant Hyunwoo called out in alarm. "Admiral, we're detecting multiple launch signatures from the planet's surface." Juan turned, surprised but not concerned. "They're primitive missiles, hardly worth raising shields." "Sir, I count over 300 launches from various locations." Captain Minja frowned. "That's more than we anticipated. Should we raise shields at standard configuration?" Juan ordered calmly. "Let them waste their weapons. It will demonstrate the futility of resistance." The Excelarian shields activated, surrounding each ship in a shimmering energy field. Under normal circumstances, these defenses could withstand impacts from asteroids. On Earth, Engineer Do-Yun watched the incoming data carefully. "Shields activated," he announced. "Tracking shield modulation patterns." "Got it. Transmitting timing updates to all weapons." The human missiles approached the alien fleet, but instead of attacking immediately, they held position just outside the shield perimeter. Small thrusters adjusted their positions minutely as they waited for the precise moment. On the Death's Shadow, the tactical officer looked confused. "Sir, the missiles have stopped. They're just waiting. Some kind of malfunction." Captain Minja suggested. Admiral Juan narrowed his eyes. "Something is wrong. Alter shield modulations immediately." But before the order could be carried out, every human missile suddenly pulsed with electromagnetic energy, perfectly timed to hit the alien shields at the exact microsecond when the modulation cycle created a vulnerability. The result was devastating. Shield generators overloaded across the fleet as the precisely calibrated energy pulses created cascading failures in their defense systems. Dozens of smaller ships lost power completely, drifting helplessly in space. On the Death's Shadow, alarms blared as systems failed throughout the ship. The bridge lights flickered and emergency power kicked in. "Impossible," Admiral Juan shouted. "How could they know about the modulation frequencies?" Captain Minje stared at the damage reports in disbelief. "Sir, we've lost shields on 30% of the fleet. 7 destroyers report complete system failures." Before Juan could respond, the second wave of Earth's attack began. Fighter jets armed with modified air-to-air missiles streaked into the sky, targeting the now vulnerable alien ships. Each missile carried a conventional warhead enhanced with the same frequency-matching technology. "Return fire," Juan ordered. "All operational ships target their launch sites." The alien vessels that still had functioning weapons began firing at Earth. Energy beams cut through the atmosphere, striking military bases and cities. Buildings crumbled and fires erupted as the deadly weapons found their targets. But the humans had anticipated this. Key military installations had been moved underground or disguised. Many of the targeted locations were decoys, designed to draw alien fire away from the real command centers. In space, the battle intensified. Earth's modified weapons continued to find their targets, disabling alien ships one by one. The flagship Death's Shadow, however, had managed to restore partial shields and was coordinating the Solarian counterattack. "Sir," Lieutenant Hyunwoo reported, "the humans are focusing their attacks on our command ships. They're targeting our communication arrays." Admiral Juan realized too late what was happening. "They're trying to disrupt our command structure. All ships operate independently if communications fail." But the order came too late for many vessels. As the Death's Shadow's communications were hit, dozens of alien ships suddenly found themselves without central coordination. Programmed to follow the flagship's commands, they hesitated in the crucial moments of battle. On Earth, Dr. Ju Park worked with the military command, analyzing the alien response patterns. There, she pointed to a display showing the Death's Shadow. Their main power conduits are exposed when they fire their primary weapons. That's when they're most vulnerable. General Sunwoo immediately relayed this information to the attack forces. "All units targeting the flagship concentrate fire on the main power conduits when they charge their primary weapon." The next time the Death's Shadow prepared to fire on an Earth military base, a squadron of stealth bombers released their payloads directly at the exposed power conduits. The resulting explosion tore through the massive ship, sending shockwaves that damaged nearby alien vessels. Admiral Juan clung to his command chair as the bridge shook violently around him. Fire suppression systems activated, filling the air with mist. "Damage report," he shouted over the alarms. "Main power offline," Captain Minja responded, his face bloody from a head wound. "Weapons systems failing. We've lost contact with the engine room." Juan stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Nearly half his fleet was disabled or destroyed. Earth's primitive forces had somehow found the one weakness in Solarian technology and exploited it perfectly. "This was supposed to be an easy conquest," he whispered. Captain Minja looked at him, waiting for orders. "Sir, should we continue the attack?" Admiral Juan had never faced defeat before. The Royal Fleet had conquered hundreds of worlds without significant losses. Yet here they were, being systematically dismantled by a species that hadn't even developed interstellar travel. "Order all functional ships to regroup at coordinates Alpha 7, he finally said. "We need to reassess our strategy." As the remaining alien vessels retreated to a safe distance, cheers erupted in command centers across Earth. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. King Taejo sat motionless on his throne as the messenger kneeled before him. The royal court had fallen silent. No one dared to breathe too loudly as the king's face darkened with each word of the report. "Your Majesty," the messenger continued, his voice trembling. "Admiral Juan reports that the royal fleet has suffered severe losses. Nearly 200 ships destroyed or disabled. The flagship Death's Shadow was heavily damaged." "How?" Taejo's voice was barely a whisper, yet it filled the entire chamber. "How could primitive beings do this to my royal fleet?" The messenger swallowed hard. "The humans somehow discovered the modulation frequency of our shield systems. They exploited the microsecond vulnerability between cycles." Taejo's fist crashed down on the armrest of his throne. "Impossible. That information is known only to our top engineers." "The human delegation, Your Majesty," said Advisor Jinky, who stood to the side. "They must have gathered intelligence during their visit to the flagship." The king turned his cold gaze to his advisor. You warned me about these humans, about their adaptability. I did, Your Majesty. What else does Admiral Juan report? Tejo asked the messenger. He has regrouped the remaining ships and requests reinforcements to continue the conquest. Tejo stood slowly, and everyone in the court bowed their heads lower. No. A murmur of surprise rippled through the court. No reinforcements, the messenger asked, confusion evident in his voice. No continuation of this conquest, Tejo clarified. Order Admiral Juan to withdraw the fleet immediately. On Earth, 3 weeks had passed since the battle. The planet was still celebrating its unexpected victory, even as it mourned the millions lost in the alien attack. Cities lay in ruins, yet a new sense of unity had emerged from the devastation. President Lee stood at the window of the newly established Global Defense Headquarters, watching workers clear debris from what had once been downtown Seoul. Madam President, General Sunwoo called from the doorway. The science team is ready for you. She nodded and followed him to the conference room, where Dr. Ju Park and Engineer Do-yeon waited with their teams. The table was covered with pieces of alien technology salvaged from crashed ships. Show me what you've learned, President Lee said. Ju stood and activated a holographic display. We've made significant progress understanding their propulsion systems. The aliens use a form of faster-than-light travel that bends space-time around the ship. With further study, we believe we can replicate it within 5 years. Their weapons? General Sunwoo asked. Engineer Do-yeon picked up a twisted piece of metal. Advanced, but not incomprehensible. They use directed energy that can be focused with incredible precision. We're already incorporating principles from their designs into our own defense systems. And what about this? President Lee pointed to a small device on the table. That, Ju said with excitement, is their communication system. It allows instantaneous contact across vast distances. We're still working out how it functions, but the implications are enormous. President Lee nodded. How long before we can build our own starship? The scientists exchanged glances. With global cooperation and resources, Do-yeon said, perhaps 10 years for a prototype. Make it 5, the president replied. We need to be prepared if they return. Meanwhile, in deep space, Admiral Juan stood before a communication screen in his private quarters. King Tejo's image stared back at him, disappointment evident in his eyes. You have failed me, Admiral, the king said coldly. The first defeat of the royal fleet in 3 centuries. Juan bowed his head. I accept full responsibility, Your Majesty. I underestimated them. As did I. Tejo admitted. Tell me about these humans. What did you learn? They are remarkably adaptable, Your Majesty. Where our species relies on established protocols and technologies refined over centuries, they improvise and evolve rapidly. In the span of days, they analyzed our shield systems and developed a countermeasure. Could they pose a threat to the Empire? Juan considered his answer carefully. Not immediately, but given time and access to our technology, yes, they could become a significant power. Tejo nodded slowly. Then we have 2 options. Destroy them completely with overwhelming force, or consider them potential allies rather than subjects. Back on Earth, global cooperation continued at an unprecedented level. National borders became less important as humanity worked together toward a common goal, preparing for the future among the stars. 6 months after the battle, Dr. Ju Park made a breakthrough. Standing in her lab, she stared in amazement as the small prototype engine hummed to life, creating a tiny bubble of distorted space-time. It works, she whispered, then louder to her team. It works. Within days, leaders from around the world gathered to witness the demonstration. The first human-built faster-than-light drive, small and crude compared to the alien version, but functional. This changes everything, President Lee said as she watched the demonstration. How soon can we scale it up? We've already begun construction on a larger version, Ju replied. With this technology, we can reach nearby star systems within months instead of centuries. In a special session of the United Nations, representatives voted unanimously to establish the Earth Defense and Exploration Force, a global organization dedicated to protecting the planet and exploring space. 1 year after the invasion, the first human starship was under construction in orbit. Built from a combination of Earth technology and salvaged alien components, it represented humanity's first true step into the galactic community. On the flagship of the retreating alien fleet, Admiral Vaughn received a surprising transmission from Earth. It was a message broadcast on frequencies the humans had learned from studying alien communication devices. To Admiral Vaughn and the Xelarian Empire, the message began. The people of Earth extend an offer of peace and dialogue. We have much to learn from each other, and perhaps more to gain as allies than as enemies. Juan watched the message twice before forwarding it to King Tejo. The humans continued to surprise him. 3 years later, King Tejo stood on the observation deck of his royal palace, watching as a small ship approached the capital planet. It was unlike any vessel in his fleet, a hybrid of Xelarian and Earth design. The human representatives have arrived, Your Majesty, Advisor Jinky announced. Show them in, Tejo ordered. Dr. Juu Park led the small delegation into the royal chamber. She had volunteered immediately when Earth needed representatives for this historic meeting. Welcome to Xelaris, King Tejo said formally. I must admit, I never expected to host humans as guests rather than conquering their world. Juu bowed respectfully. Life often takes unexpected paths, Your Majesty. We come seeking knowledge and offering friendship. And what does Earth offer the Xelarian Empire that we cannot simply take? Innovation, Juu replied without hesitation. A fresh perspective. Solutions to problems you may not know you have. In return, we seek to learn from a civilization thousands of years older than our own. Tejo studied the humans thoughtfully. These were the beings who had defeated his royal fleet, not through superior technology, but through adaptability and determination. Perhaps, he said finally, there is wisdom in this approach. The galaxy is vast, with threats unknown even to the Empire. Allies may prove more valuable than subjects. As negotiations began between Earth and the Xelarian Empire, Admiral Juan watched from the side of the chamber. He had learned an important lesson, one that would change imperial policy forever. Never underestimate a species fighting for its home. And throughout the galaxy, word spread of the small blue planet whose inhabitants had defeated the mighty royal fleet. Earth was no longer an unknown world at the edge of space. It had announced its presence to the stars in the most dramatic way possible. The universe would never be the same.